What's good? It's the Clenz coming at you yet again with another fulfilling piece of information that could potentially be the building blocks to your success. And what's more important than living? Well, not a whole lot. And that's why I want to discuss the traditional conventions of living and home ownership because, like many conventions of life in this society, it's changing. And where do I start? Well, let's start with what traditional home ownership looks like. Okay. Now, for the most part, home ownership, property ownership, is held at the highest of the totem pole in American culture. Other places, like in Britain, the UK, it's not really seen as something as prestigious. Many people don't have much problem renting. However, in America, people are willing to sign their name on the dotted line, become bound to maybe a 20 to 30-year agreement of a mortgage rate, and that's how they attain ownership of property or a home. Now, it takes some type of credibility to get approved for mortgage, okay? You have to have some type of okay credit, have to have some type of okay amount of income, and there has to be something. There's always some types of hoops to jump through to get anything, really, okay? And some people are not equipped or do not feel as if they are ready to embark on that journey and just stick to renting, okay? But for those that do have a mortgage, I think one of the biggest fallacies in early investing and the American economy is that we as a people get assets and wealth confused with liabilities. Because many people, when they sign the agreement and everything is all said and done, you shake your hands with the realtor and he says, "Congratulations, you're a homeowner." But that's bullshit. And he knows that, okay? Because you do not own anything until your mortgage is paid off 20, 30 years down the line. Until then, it is a liability that you are responsible for. And I think that because of this very limiting way of attaining wealth that is so drawn out and tedious and monotonous, and sometimes it could be a hassle to ever get to a point of where you can even be approved for a mortgage, people are thinking outside the box and actually building little ass boxes to live inside of. You see the tiny houses, right? You see how people are having alternative ways of living in alternative spaces. These tiny houses are great though, because you know me, all right? I am all for sustainability. I am all for sufficiency, self-sufficiency, okay? And if you cannot afford to go through all of these prerequisites and meet all of this criteria just to get inside of some shelter, some permanent shelter, then by all means, you might be interested in just building your own. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They are building their own, and they are making it specifically based on their needs. The look, the exterior, the interior, everything is to a T based on what they need and what they desire in their life. And for the most part, they generate their own energy, right? Solar panels, solar generators. All of these things are just completely home-based. They do not have to depend so much on outside forces, outside utility providers. They could do it themselves. And in addition to that, unlike the mortgage and, different systems of this nature, it's yours, right? It's yours, oh, it's yours. Yes, a tiny house or anything of this nature that resembles this, it's yours. It is not something that you are receiving a loan to fund a down payment on a mortgage so you could eventually pay it off decades down the line. Once everything is said and done with a tiny house, and especially if you build it yourself and you're not dependent on a contractor to do it for you, it is yours, right? And it's real wealth. It's a real asset. It's not a liability. It's not something that could be taken away because you didn't make payments or something happened traumatic in the family, or your fixed rate on your mortgage all of a sudden became variable and they increased mortgage payments by 10 times, 30 times the amount. This shit happened. This shit is still happening. But many don't really understand the depth in which the 2008 to 2009 housing crisis really was, all right? Many people were being taken advantage of, right? And many banks, realtors, and financial institutions were loaning out loans and mortgages, approving people for mortgages that were not equipped to make those payments, right? And ended up enslaved to these liabilities, right? Because many people were pressured into signing these agreements, right, by shady realty agents and, different types of property managers, whatever the fuck, right? And next thing they knew, they really didn't know what the fuck they were signing up for. And probably either, their house got foreclosed because they couldn't afford it. And it was just an ugly, ugly sight to see, And even people that were well off and kind of understood a little bit more about what was going on, many houses got foreclosed, all right, all throughout America. And unfortunately, even till this day, we see the same type of paradigm. We see the same type of business model. I seen some shit on TV that said, bad credit, no credit, we don't give a damn, come on down, we'll approve you for some shit. And unfortunately, that's, it's a double-edged sword. Because for the person that is in desperate need of shelter, right, it's great that they can get approved and they have a permanent place to stay for that time being. However, most of the times, they approve these people because they know that they can't afford it. And once it becomes defaulted, okay, debt is big business. And you'll be having calls from all sorts of different debt collectors and all sorts of different entities and agents and things of this nature trying to get that money back, right? Debt is big business, man. Huge business, multi-billion-dollar industry, no doubt. So all of these things really come into play when I think of home ownership, when I think of really living in itself, because tiny houses, right, is something that is so innovative, so revolutionary, so self-sufficient, so alternative and unconventional and against the grain that it is challenging traditional home ownership. It is challenging what we deem is an acceptable ways to live, an acceptable means to live, I should say, right? Because who really wants to pay a mortgage for 20 to 30 years until they eventually own something? And by that time, that when everything is said and done, you paid way more than what the property is actually worth. So you may have been better off just renting and saving up, right, until you get enough money to actually pay for something outright, okay? Or you could even do rent to own. Now, the thing with rent to own, though, man, I have to say it can be tricky, all right? Because the concept of renting to own, I think, is fucking fabulous, all right? However, you have to read the fine print, people. You have to be dealing with a reliable, a trustworthy real estate agent or somebody that you know personally within your family or in your social circle that you could trust. Because the truth is, renting to own has a bad name because of people using it for the wrong reasons, all right? And it's true, though. When you rent to own, okay, the reason I like renting to own, and if you cannot go the route of traditional homeownership, you should look into renting to own, because rent and evictions and things of this nature, okay? If you have an eviction, all right, it's really not seen as debt in the traditional sense, okay? What is killing most Americans and most of the world is really mortgage defaults, loan defaults. All right. And renting to own and getting evicted and things of this nature isn't really gonna damage your credit, isn't gonna put you in a hole as deep as it would be if you were to default on a mortgage or default on a loan. That is and usually can be a really, really strenuous hole to climb out of. All right. And it can affect your future, your immediate future, getting approved for certain things. And people in general just look down on it. But debt, right, is not it. Evictions and things of this nature isn't really seen as debt. It does not put a huge ass dent in your credit score, your reputation. You can leave when you want. It doesn't become this huge fucking liability on your shoulder like a mortgage, like, and you're pressured to pay it or else, right? Because you were locked into a 20, 30-year agreement and you never know what happens, man. Shit happens. This is life, People lose jobs, family members going to the hospital, insurance coverage is lost or premiums go up. Shit happens where, man, you cannot afford it. Now, renting to own, you can set it up in a way where, one, you have an option to buy after your renting term is up. So you have a lease of amounts of time you pay rent. And when that lease is up, you have the option to buy. Now, the privilege of this is usually you have to pay more, right? That's just, you got to charge it to the game, bro. I mean, if you have the option to buy and still reap the privileges of a renter, then you might have to fork out a little bit of money. All right. So you might be paying more than what the property is actually worth. But shit, it's just like a mortgage. And in addition to that, you have to be mindful and conscious and aware of how much more you're willing to pay, because the reason that renting to own gets such a bad rap is because real estate agents take advantage of people that cannot afford these types of systems and charge a lot more, 10 times, 20 times more than it's even worth. I've talked to real estate agents personally, said that they morally could not get involved with such a thing because they were blatantly trying to get over on people. But the system of renting to own is great. And you can, it's always a possibility that you can work out an arrangement with the homeowner or the landlord or whatever, that, you are not responsible for the repairs and the damages and the things that are usually applied only to the homeowner because you are a renter. You are renting to own. However, this is not a guarantee, right? But the beautiful thing about renting to own is that you can and you should always sit down and coordinate and optimize the agreement so it really is, you don't have any unexpected surprises later down the line, because renting to own can be great. The fact is that, one, it's a renting situation. And, if you can basically set up something where, look, you're not responsible for these types of repairs and damages as you would be as an owner, or you're only responsible for a select amount, okay? Great, because that way you could save money up in the mid-time to eventually buy it when the lease is up, okay? And in addition to that, like I said, and like I emphasize all the time, if you cannot afford a mortgage, right? If you think that this is just over your head or whatever, for the most part, you would like to rent. Makes perfect sense, okay? Perfect. Renting to own, I think, is something also to look into because of these privileges I'm trying to explain, right? It can be modified in such a way where it is perfect for you in your situation, but really make sure you read the fine print, really make sure that there is a sit down involved with all of the parties so everything is clarified, okay? What else? Lastly, I think I want to mention Airbnb, man, because Airbnb, again, is another sign of this huge living and hospitality revolution that is taking place right now in front of us. Tiny houses, Airbnb, all this shit is so unconventional, almost so open source to an extent that The authorities, as we know, are frantically running around trying to keep up and trying to regulate it, but they can't, because the will of the people, the will of humanity is so strong, and they know that they could do everything that the authorities are doing, but better, because everything they could do, we can do better. And we've proven that again and again and again and again and again, and we will. And we are going to continue to do so. And Airbnb, I mean, shit, dude, what is that? Really, what is that? Airbnb is shitting on hospitality services, hospitality providers, traditional living situations, right? It is so out of the norm, but makes perfect sense. Why the fuck can't you just rent out your space to somebody and turn, I'm not going to buy a fucking hotel room, or I'm not going to buy a hotel building and rent out these rooms. If I have my house, I'm finna rent out all the motherfucking rooms in here. This house has so many rooms that are not being used. You know what? Fuck it. Let me put that shit on Airbnb. And this is how things are changing. Home ownership, right? Changing. Tiny houses, renting to own. People are looking at mortgages and are just disgusted by the concept, or just disgusted how much it is putting this country in debt, put individuals in debt, and how so many real estate agents and so many financial institutions have been taking advantage of people in the name of them just simply wanting to attain assets. How dare them, right? And so Airbnb, right? Tiny houses, renting to own, even just renting by itself, and building something of your own to live in the meantime, is so much more productive and so much more healthier, I believe, than having to worry about, oh my God, like I need to pay my mortgage, or else, the bank's going to come, they're going to foreclose my shit and do all this and blah, 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 and tarnish my name, tarnish my reputation, ruin my life, right? And that's the type of frame of mind that most people are in on a monthly basis. Everybody's just trying to get by, and these financial institutions and these different global banking entities around the world want people to be in that frame of mind, because when they're stressed out and when they aren't thinking straight, then they pop up with some type of solution that is portrayed as the holy grail of fucking solutions, even though it's half-assed and is just going to continue this vortex of just complete monotony. My bad. But nevertheless, man, I'm getting riled up. I think you get the picture. I know you get the picture. So I hope that you and yours are painting the perfect picture. So until next time, it's the Clenz.